My husband had been out of touch for almost 3 days. He had told me he might not reply for a while, but my worry grew with each passing day. I started thinking about calling the police. Just as that thought crossed my mind, one of my subordinates called. "Ma'am, your husband has passed away in an accident." I was in shock. Why did she call me instead of someone else? But I couldn't think about that. I needed to get to the hospital. There, I saw my husband's body, barely recognizable. "My name is Harper. I'm 28 years old. I got married 2 years ago, and my husband, Christopher, is 2 years older than me. We live together, and I work at an iced tea company. We both wanted to have kids someday, though we hadn't started trying yet." Christopher was incredibly dedicated to his job. Just recently, he was told he might get a promotion. The day he found out, he rushed home, excited to tell me. "Harper, I might get a promotion soon," he said. "Really? That's amazing," I replied, thrilled for him. "It's been tough, but I'm glad I worked hard," he said, beaming. Christopher worked so much, even on weekends and late nights. Sometimes, he'd come home just before midnight, exhausted. I worried about him burning out, but seeing him so happy about his job made me proud. It made me want to work harder too. But after that day, I started noticing some changes. His overtime hours increased, and he wouldn't get home until after midnight. His weekend shifts, which used to be occasional, became almost every weekend, and last month, he even started working on Saturdays. His attitude toward me felt colder too. We used to spend our free days together, but that stopped. I found it strange. How could he work so much without showing signs of exhaustion? Worried, I decided to ask him about it one night when he came home late. "Christopher, can I talk to you for a minute?" I asked. "What? I'm tired and want to sleep," he replied. "I get that, but lately you're always on your phone before bed, even when you're home late. Aren't you tired?" "What are you trying to say? How I spend my free time is my business," he said, sounding annoyed. "Are you really that busy with work?" I asked, concerned. He paused, his expression turning cold. "Harper, you don't understand my job. Don't butt in when I'm tired from work," he said, then walked out of the room. After that, my uneasy feelings didn't go away. Then, one day, I got into a car accident on my way home from work. I was rear-ended, and an ambulance took me to the hospital. I was bruised and needed to stay in the hospital for a few days for observation. I tried calling my husband to bring me some clothes, but he didn't answer. I called repeatedly and messaged him, but there was no response. He should have been done with work by then. Normally, he would at least reply to a message. Finally, after calling every few minutes, he picked up an hour later. As I started explaining what happened, he let out a big sigh. "Oh, you're so persistent," my husband snapped when he finally answered the phone. "Can't you tell I'm working overtime? I don't have time to answer every call." "I'm sorry, but this is important," I replied. "What are you talking about?" "I got into a car accident on my way home," I explained, trying to keep calm. "I'm in the hospital, my whole body hurts, but luckily, it's nothing life-threatening." "An accident?" he replied, sounding irritated. "What a hassle you're causing." I couldn't believe his response. "Huh?" I said, stunned. He continued, ignoring my shock. "Stop getting into accidents when I'm busy, and I'm not paying for any car repairs. Got it?" "All right," I said quietly, swallowing my disappointment. "But could you at least bring me a change of clothes?" "What? Why do I have to do that?" he snapped. "I'm exhausted, and now you're asking me to come to the hospital? You got yourself into this mess with your carelessness." "Carelessness?" I asked, surprised. "The accident wasn't my fault, it was the other driver's." "Stop nagging. I'm not coming, and I won't be replying for a while. Figure it out yourself," he said before hanging up. I sat there in my hospital bed, feeling the weight of his words settle over me. The sounds of the busy hospital around me only seemed to amplify the ache in my chest, and before I knew it, I was in tears. How could he speak to me like that? He used to care about me more than his work. Now, it felt like he didn't care at all. If I could, I'd get my own clothes, but my parents lived too far away to help, and he was the only one I could rely on. I sent a few more messages, but he never responded. In the end, I had to buy everything I needed from the hospital store. Since then, I'd tried contacting him a few more times, but 3 days had passed without a single reply. He said he wouldn't be in touch, but this was unusual. I began to worry something had happened to him too. Could he have been in an accident? As I lay in bed, lost in anxious thoughts, there was a knock at the hospital door. When I called, "Yes?" my coworker Jasmine, who I usually got along with well, entered the room. "Jasmine, thank you for coming. I was so surprised when I heard you'd been in an accident," she said with concern. "When I hadn't seen you at work, I thought I'd check in." "It's not a big deal, just some bruises and a broken bone," I said, trying to reassure her. "It's more than enough that you're okay," Jasmine said, giving me a reassuring smile. For a while, we talked and laughed about small things, which helped me feel a bit better, but as visiting hours came to an end, Jasmine looked like she wanted to say something but was hesitating. Sensing her discomfort, I asked, "Jasmine, is something wrong?" She hesitated. "I'm sorry, Harper, I didn't know if I should bring this up, but I saw something." "Saw what?" I asked, feeling a sudden pang of unease. "I saw your husband, with Daisy." "When?" I asked, stunned. 3 days ago. Daisy was a younger coworker at my company. I'd been her mentor when she first joined, and we'd stayed friendly, even having lunch together once a week. The last time she and my husband had seen each other should have been at our wedding. Why would they be together now? I wanted to believe it was nothing, but a terrible thought crept in. Could there be something going on between them? I dismissed it immediately, thinking, no, they wouldn't do that to me. But Jasmine went on to tell me that she had seen my husband with a suitcase, walking beside Daisy 3 days ago, and now that I thought about it, Daisy hadn't been at work since then. She'd taken paid leave. Anxiously, I called my husband's office, and my worst fears were confirmed. He had also applied for paid leave 3 days ago. At that moment, all my doubts became certainty. My husband and Daisy, both of them, betraying me. Had all those nights he claimed to be working late or on weekends actually been cover-ups for meeting her? The thought of it made my stomach twist. Maybe they'd even been seeing each other long before this. All the strange behavior, the late nights, his coldness toward me, it all made sense now. A bitter realization settled over me. Without thinking, I grabbed my phone and started calling him. I hadn't bothered much in the past few days, assuming he'd ignore my calls, but I couldn't just sit here anymore. He wasn't going to get away with this. I called again and again, letting it ring over and over. Finally, after half an hour, he answered, sounding annoyed. "What's your problem?" "I told you I wouldn't be answering for a while," my husband snapped. "Are you really that busy?" I shot back. "Too busy to even take a call from your wife?" "Of course, I'm working every day. Even though you're on paid leave until tomorrow?" "What kind of work could you be doing?" I asked, knowing he'd been lying. He hesitated for a moment, realizing he'd been caught. Then he scrambled to cover it up. What? I didn't take any leave." "It's no use lying," I said firmly. "I already checked with your company." After a pause, he gave in. "All right, fine, I just wanted a break, so I've been relaxing at home." "Oh, really? With Daisy? And a suitcase packed for a relaxing time?" I pushed further. Caught off guard, he dropped the act. "So, you found out," he sneered. "Yes, I'm on a trip with Daisy. Now that you know, stop bothering me, you ugly woman." The word stung, but I pressed on. "Why, Christopher? Why her? Why do you think? She's younger and prettier than you," he replied cruelly. "Look, I'm having a good time, so leave me alone. Don't worry, I'll divorce you when I get back." With that, he laughed coldly and hung up. In that moment, any love I had for him turned to hatred. The betrayal, so blatant and heartless, filled me with rage. "I won't let them get away with this," I vowed. I decided to take revenge on both of them. The next day, after I was discharged from the hospital, I started planning. I even began looking for a lawyer. But before I could take any action, I received an unexpected call. Daisy's name appeared on my screen. Confused, I answered. "Hello? Harper." "I'm so sorry," Daisy said, her voice shaky. "Isn't it common courtesy to apologize in person?" I replied icily. "Yes, I know, but that's not why I'm calling. It's about Christopher." "What about him?" I asked, wary. There was a long pause before Daisy spoke, her words almost a whisper. "Your husband, he's dead. There was an accident." I was so shocked, I could barely respond. "What? He's dead?" I stammered. "What are you talking about? Weren't you on a trip together?" "We were," she admitted, "but on the way back from the airport, he got into an accident. He was hit by a car, and he didn't move after that." My heart pounded as I processed what she'd said. And then Daisy told me that Christopher had been brought to the very hospital where I'd just been discharged. I hung up, informed the nurse, and made my way to see him. using crutches since my leg hadn't fully healed. I expected to be led to a morgue, but to my surprise, Christopher was still alive, barely. He lay motionless, severely injured. Just then, Daisy rushed in, gasping for breath. Seeing him lying there, she collapsed, shocked that he was alive but in critical condition. There was so much I wanted to say to both of them, but it wasn't the time. I told Daisy we'd talk later and left the hospital. Days later, Christopher survived, but he was paralyzed from the waist down and would need a wheelchair for the rest of his life. When my in-laws learned about his affair, they were furious. Despite their sympathy for their son's condition, they didn't hold back. "You brought this on yourself," they said sternly. After they left, I decided it was time to confront both Christopher and Daisy. I called her, and we arranged to meet so we could all finally talk. When I arrived at my husband's hospital room, I overheard him and Daisy in a heated argument. "If you hadn't pushed me, none of this would have happened," Christopher shouted. "It's all your fault." "What? You're the one who insisted we take that route. Don't blame me," Daisy snapped back. "Oh, really? None of this would have happened if we hadn't gone on this trip you wanted. I paid for everything, give me my money back, and you should cover my treatment too. You awful woman, you hurt the man you love, so it's only fair." Daisy scoffed. "Are you serious? With a guy like you? This was just a fling. I have no intention of seeing you again." I'd had enough. I pushed open the door, took a deep breath, and shouted, "Enough, this happened because of your affair in the first place. Take your petty arguments somewhere else." They froze, finally noticing I was there. Their faces turned pale with shock, but I kept going. "Are you both really arguing in this situation? Do you even understand where this has led you?" Christopher quickly tried to play it off. "Harper, don't worry, I'm breaking up with this ridiculous woman." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really?" "Yes, I've realized it's always been you for me, Harper," he stammered. "Let's just forget this and start over." "Start over?" I laughed, unable to help myself. "Didn't you tell me we'd get a divorce when you got home? And now, after you've fought with your affair partner, you think I'll take you back?" He looked stunned. "Harper, wait, didn't you love me?" "Love? Don't twist things. You were the one who betrayed that love. You can't just come running back when it's convenient for you. I'm not as gullible as you think. Stay out of my life, and regret this for the rest of yours." Christopher's face went blank at my words. Daisy, pale and trembling, didn't say a word. Later, I was officially discharged from the hospital and went to stay with my parents. With a lawyer's help, I finalized my divorce from Christopher. I demanded alimony from both him and Daisy, which they paid in full. Christopher lost his job when his company discovered he'd been misusing funds to finance their affair. His paralysis made it unlikely he'd find work again, and the company was now also suing him for damages. As for Daisy, news of her affair spread quickly around the office. She became the target of cold stares and whispers, eventually leading her to skip work frequently. Soon, she resigned under the pressure. Now, those two will likely struggle for a long time, but I feel no sympathy. They created this mess themselves. I've moved into a new apartment near my workplace and started a fresh chapter in my life. While some colleagues are curious and ask questions, I don't feel the need to share everything. The rumors will fade, and all that matters now is moving on and enjoying life on my terms, free from the past.